Hey everybody, you're listening to my podcast Suchitra's Life, and I'm Suchitra. I've been off from my podcast for a couple of weeks due to my personal commitments. I couldn't really record a podcast episode, but nevertheless, I'm here back again with another book to delve into. And in this episode, I'll be talking about the book that I read titled The Ride of a Lifetime by Robert Iger, who earlier headed Disney group of companies, and it's his journey. It's of course autobiographical in nature, and I didn't really expect mind-blowing stuff while I was picking it up. I thought, okay, it's just it is like any other memoir or autobiography. It's gonna be like that, but this one turned out to be a really good compass when it comes to managing teams and working with people. It turned out to be a really like a guide, I would say, in terms of how you go about managing teams and how you work and get along with people of different temperaments. Robert is from like a very middle class background, and his father had depression all his life, and that kind of affected Robert in a way that he promised himself that his life wouldn't go waste, and his father wanted that as well for him. And Robert joined ABC or Cap Cities company as an entry-level assistant, an entry-level executive assistant who would help around the set and make sure that the show is running properly. So it was a very basic job role, but then slowly he managed to climb up the ladder, and people started taking a notice of him because of his work purely. And when ABC was acquired by Disney, again he came into limelight because he was made the head of the ABC group companies under the Disney's guidance. So throughout his 45 years of career, he managed to play a key role in terms of helping Disney get back its place in the market. It's because of Robert the acquisitions like Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm, also the Fox's acquisition was made possible because of Robert, and it's his decision making in crucial times was something that I really wish I would develop with time. So when Robert became a part of Disney's family, the relationship between the then Disney's CEO Michael and Pixar's head Steve Jobs wasn't that great. So much so that Steve Jobs at one point had announced that he would not really work with Disney at all, like ever. But when Robert became the CEO, Robert wanted to mend the relationship, and he went back and he worked his way. He managed to gain Steve's trust and respect, and that's how the acquisition of Pixar was possible. I had really enjoyed this episode of Pixar's acquisition because Pixar was doing incredibly well when compared to Disney animation at that point of time, and Disney, though, was releasing few films, they were not really doing that well at the box office, and it was Robert's sheer grit and determination to help Disney get back to its original state of top position that he took a lot of time, but he managed to convince Steve Jobs, and that's when Steve was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So back-to-back things have happened. So the book is titled The Ride of a Lifetime, and I should say that it is indeed the ride of a lifetime. So many mentors he met along the way, and at the end of the book you see Robert summarizing some leadership lessons that he learned, and let me give you an overview of what he considers leadership lessons. The first one is to innovate or to die. So he managed to adapt to new technology at every point of time, and he's always constantly looking out for ways to innovate and help Disney get to the next level. That's one beautiful lesson over there. And he also says that it's really important to create an environment wherein people refuse to accept mediocrity. It's not so much as a chase towards perfectionism, but it's to push back against the urge to say that good enough is good enough. He also feels that we should treat everyone with fairness and empathy, and this doesn't mean that you lower your expectations or convey the message that mistakes don't matter. It means that you create an environment where people know you'll hear them out, that you're emotionally consistent and fair-minded, and that they'll be given second chances for their honest mistakes. True integrity is another thing that he really votes for. True integrity, a sense of knowing who you are and being guided by your own clear sense of right and wrong, is a kind of secret leadership weapon, he says. And he says that it's really important to respect the creative talent, because you never know how much they've invested of themselves into a project. So you have to be really, really careful in be it giving them feedback or critiquing their work. He says that managing creativity is an art, it's not a science. So when giving notes, you got to be mindful of how much of themselves the person you're speaking to has poured into the project. So don't start negatively and don't start small. People will often focus on little details as a way of masking a lack of any clear, coherent, big thoughts. If you start petty, you seem petty. And I think that's how he also kind of realized that managing creative talent is a huge part of his job role. And he says that one of his mentors left him a note that said, avoid getting into the business of manufacturing trombone oil. You may become the greatest trombone oil manufacturer in the world, but in the end, the world only consumes a few quarts of trombone oil a year. So basically, the mentor was telling him not to invest in small projects that would sap his resources and not give much back. So that was one lesson that he learned there. Also, he says that if the top people who are at the top of a company have a dysfunctional relationship, there's no way that the rest of the company can be functional. It is like having two parents who fight all the time. The kids know, and they start to reflect the animosity back onto the parents and at each other. As a leader, if you don't do the work, the people around you are going to know, and you lose their respect fast. You have to be attentive. You often have to sit through meetings that, if given the choice, you might choose not to sit through. You have to listen to other people's problems and help find solutions. It's all part of the job. And also, he says that we all want to believe that we are indispensable, but you have to be self-aware enough that you don't cling on to the notion that you're the only person who can do this job. At its essence, good leadership isn't about being indispensable. It's about helping others be prepared to step into your shoes, giving them access to your own decision making, identifying the skills they need to develop and helping them improve, and sometimes being honest with them about why they're not ready for the next step too. Another thing that he says that the earlier Disney CEO Michael used to say that micromanaging is underrated, and he kind of says that he agrees with him to a point. Like, sweating the details can show how much you care. Great is often a collection of very small things after all. The downside of micromanagement is that it can be suffocating. It can reinforce the feeling that you don't trust the people who work for you. So a healthy balance is all that is needed. He says that nobody wants to follow a leader who's negative and pessimistic. If you walk up and down the halls constantly telling people the sky is falling, a sense of doom and gloom will over time permeate the company. He says that you can't communicate pessimism to the people around you. It ruins the morale. No one wants to, be surrounded with such negativity. Pessimism leads to paranoia, which leads to defensiveness, which leads to risk aversion. So that's what he says, be optimistic. As a leader, you can't really afford to be really pessimistic. And you can be realistic. Instead of being pessimistic, you can be realistic and just say that, okay, here's the problem and I am with you in it, so let's find a solution. So that's one way of putting it together. Alright, and he says that if you don't articulate your priorities clearly, then the people around you don't know what they should be doing. Time and energy and capital gets wasted. So you can do a lot for the morale of the people around you just by taking the guesswork out of their day-to-day life, which is actually a good lesson. And he also says that technological advancements will eventually make older business models obsolete. So you can either bemoan that and try with all your might to protect the status quo, but you can also work hard to understand and embrace it with more enthusiasm and creativity than your competitors. So Robert had played also a crucial role in putting together Disney Hotstar, the app that we all access now to various content. So he kind of brought together Disney and the Hotstar platform to distribute Disney's content. He says that a little respect goes a long way, and the absence of it can be very costly. So this is regarding the incident with Steve Jobs. The earlier CEO had kind of a conflict with him. So he says this, a little respect goes a long way, and it actually did, because Steve ended up liking Robert and the acquisition was made possible. He also says that you certainly can't make a major acquisition, for example, without building the necessary models to help you determine whether a deal is the right one. But you also have to recognize that there is never 100% certainty. No matter how much data you've been given, it's still ultimately a risk, and the decision to take that risk or not comes down to one person's instinct. So if something doesn't feel right to you, it won't be right for you. So he says that a lot of companies acquire others without much sensitivity toward what they're really buying. They think they're buying physical assets or manufacturing assets or intellectual property, which is true in some cases. But what they're really acquiring is people, right? So that is another one that he, talks about. And at times of delivering bad news, like probably terminating people or telling them that it's not really working out, he says to avoid euphemistic corporate language and just stick to the reality, because ultimately it is a bad news, and why to beat around the bush when it is what it is. He says that in any negotiation, you got to be clear about where you stand from the beginning. There is no short-term gain that's worth the long-term erosion of trust that occurs when you go back on the expectation you created early on. He also says that most deals are personal. This is even more true if you're negotiating with someone over something he or she has created. You have to know what you want out of any deal, but to get there, you also need to be aware of what's at stake for the other person. Sometimes, in order to disrupt a business model that is working, requires no small amount of courage. It means intentionally taking on short-term losses in the hope that a long-term risk will pay off. Routines and priorities get disrupted. Traditional ways of doing business get slowly marginalized and eroded and start to lose money as the new model takes over. That's a big ask in terms of a company's culture and mindset. So he says that when you're doing it, you're actually telling people who for their entire careers have been compensated based on the success of their traditional business. You're literally telling them, okay, don't worry about that too much anymore. Worry about this disruption instead. But this isn't profitable yet, and it won't be for a while. So deal with this kind of uncertainty. So that is what you're actually telling all of your employees, and it takes a lot of courage to do it. Also, he says that it's not good to have power for too long. You don't realize the way your voice seems to boom louder than every other voice in the room. And he says you get used to people withholding their opinions until they hear what you have to say. People get afraid to bring ideas to you, afraid to dissent, afraid to engage. So this can happen even to the most well-intentioned leaders. You have to work continuously and actively to fend off its corrosive effects. Also, he says that whatever may happen, twists of fate beyond your control, hold on to your awareness of yourself, even as the world tells you how important and powerful you are. The moment you start to believe it all too much, the moment you look at yourself in the mirror and see a title on your forehead, you've lost your way. So I feel this last one is something is really I don't know, when I was reading it, I just became quiet all of a sudden, because this is coming from somebody who is actually quite powerful and played a crucial role in Disney's success. Yeah, overall, this book has been literally the ride of a lifetime, and I want all my listeners to pick it up, read it. You'll get to know a lot about Disney and various companies that they've acquired in all these years. Until next time, take care.